to work on the next project, which is going to be a 2D, 3D painting, you really want to focus on getting a subject matter that's fairly simple. As you can see here, you've got a picture of a lion, and you've got just the face of the lion. Other examples are some backgrounds that are very, very simple, and you can see the Coke and the glass. This works really well. But you want to do some research and try to find an image that's going to work good for you. You want to send those to me, make sure I get those approved. We also need to make sure those are graphed and cropped. So cropping is something where no matter what size it is, we're going to crop it so it's 6 inches by 9 inches exactly. And that can be in landscape mode like this image is, or we can crop them so they're in portrait like this image is. So it just depends on the direction that you want to go as we crop. You can crop them. I suggest you allow me to crop them because I'm going to help you guys get the size you need. Once you get them cropped, I can send them back to you. I can have them printed here. But we need to make sure they are cropped to the correct size and then printed 6 by 9. From there, what you're going to do is graph it, just like we did before, 1 inch by 1 inch, a 1-to-1 ratio. So this is going to be what we're going to be looking at whenever we do our redrawing. Now, whenever you actually redraw, you're going to redraw this on scrap paper. Any type of old paper, it doesn't matter because we're actually going to transfer that later then to the painting paper we're going to be using. So the first step then is to redraw this 1-to-1 ratio. One thing I do want to go over is getting your drawing onto the 2 pieces of watercolor paper you're going to be using for your 2D and 3D painting. So we're going to be doing 2 different paintings of the same subject. So I want to make sure that these are the same drawing. Well, how do you do that? Once you have your drawing completed and you've used your graph and you've got this all drawn out on scrap paper, this is now your drawing. I know I give everyone a hard time about we do not trace. You don't want to take something that someone else has done, like even a photocopy, and just trace that. That's not what we're doing. That's tracing someone else's work. You want to use your graph to redraw this correctly the best you can. Now it's your drawing. It's not a trace of something. You redrew this. It's yours. So since this is your drawing, you can take that and transfer it onto the 2 pieces of paper by tracing if you want. You can take this to a light table or even a window. Make sure they match up nicely. And then you can go ahead and actually trace it on to both sheets because you're going to need 2 pieces, one for your 2D, one for your 3D. If you don't have access to a good window or a light table, what you can do is something called a rubbing. A rubbing is where you take your drawing to a window and you see the back of it. You can see where the lines are at. So I'm going to take a look at this dark line I made a little darker on this cup. On the back, if I hold up to window, I can see where the lines are. And you can take a pencil then and actually go through and make it behind it really dark with the graphite. From there, you can take your paper, put it onto your final paper, make sure it lines up, and you can actually then draw. I prefer using a ballpoint pen, but for demonstration purposes, I'm just going to use a pencil. And you can go over your lines, pushing down just a little bit. You don't want to make a ditch. And that will actually transfer the graphite onto the final paper. So if you can't trace, you can do a rubbing just like this. But you are going to need to hang on to this scrap drawing you did because you may need it later on. So once you're done drawing this and you transfer it onto both sheets, don't throw this away. Put this aside until later. You might need it. Of the 2 that you get transferred, you're only going to be needing 1 for the 2D painting. The one for the 3D painting that you made, you can put that one away as well till later. And you're going to focus on the 2-dimensional painting first. No matter what, this is what you're going to paint completely finished first before you do your 3D. I think it's going to be very advantageous for you guys to do that. I think it's going to make your lives easier. But focus on the 2D. The 3D is for later. So let's talk about some things you're going to want to really think about. First and foremost, as I said before, you are going to want to get some scrap paper and graph it 6 by 9, 1 inch by 1 inch. one thing you can do to make your life easier is use the left-hand side of the page and the bottom side of the page as guides, because those are already 90 degrees. And then you can measure up 9 inches, up 9 inches, use your ruler and make a line. And then over 6, use your ruler and make a line. And that's going to get you a true 6x9 area. I'd highly recommend you do that, because otherwise you don't know if your rectangle at 6x9 is true or not. And if you graph it by using that as your right angle, you'll have a nice clean area. Again, very, very simple. Taking my ruler, 6 inches, making a mark, slide straight down. 6 inches, make a mark. Then you can just connect that line. And of course you can go up 9, and connect that. From there, just like we did before, every inch make a mark, every inch make a mark, connect them so you have a nice clean graph. You're going to have to graph the same thing to your image that you've cropped at 6x9. You're going to have to do the exact same thing. Again, you should be able to see just the image that's 6x9. I'm not doing the whole page, just the image that's 6 inches by 9 inches. And you do the exact same thing with your ruler. Every inch make a mark, slide straight down, every inch, connect those. Every inch make a mark, slide it over. Every inch make a mark, and connect those as well. If you missed how to graph that, go back and look at the first video that I made for the monochromatic paintings. It'll be easy to see how I did the graphing. But you should have the graph on your paper you're drawing from and a graph on the scrap paper. Let's talk about actually redrawing. So it should be the same thing as we did before. You should be able to take simply your graph, and as you redraw, you should be able to do your exact same measurements you did before. Again, that's all on that first video to redraw. If you have questions, make sure you email me, but it should be the same exact thing. So what do you redraw? Well, only the basic things. If you look at this flower, there's a lot of petals going on here. I would only draw the most obvious petals. Don't try to draw every little small aspect. A good example of this is I have a finished painting of a 2D, 3D. And you can see this line on the left, which is our 2D. That's what we're going to be going for. As you can see, this person only drew the most basic areas. They didn't try to do every detail. We'll use the drawing later when we do the 3D painting to add all the detail. But for right now, your drawing should be very, very basic. Don't try to draw anything too detailed, just the basic areas. Even with this Coke bottle that I have to show, this is a 2D finished painting. Only the most basic areas are drawn. There's no Coca-Cola, there's no suds, there's no detail, but the most basic stuff is there. And that's going to be a big deal as you start drawing on your scrap paper. I'm going to want to see those most basic areas that you're working on. Once you start painting, the painting process is actually fairly simple. The 2D part, again, which we're doing first, can be real colors. As you look with this lion, pretty realistic colors. They're browns, but they don't have to be realistic colors. This lion could be pink and purple. I have an example. Someone found a picture of a dragon, and they did that. And for their 2D part, very, very bright colors. Bright orange, bright green, bright blue. Think about this like a coloring book. You want to make sure everything is super flat, super simple. Flat in terms of all the colors look like it's just one continuously flat color. So you can see that in the blue, you can see that in the orange and the green. So it really looks like a coloring book. So you can make the colors up. In fact, whenever you do your 2D and your 3D painting, these can have different colors. That's completely fine. But just make sure that the 2D painting is very flat colors. And you can also, as you're painting, think about, you could keep little areas between the two areas that the colors are matching. You can leave a little bit of white there, a tiny bit of white, if you want to help kind of see what you're doing. But you want to make sure all your edges are super clean. We'll actually go back at the end and outline everything in a black Sharpie marker, again, so it looks like it's something from a coloring book. Flat colors, clean edges. That's what we're going for. And you don't have to have orange right out of the tube. You can actually mix, like this dragon's orange, you can actually mix a little bit of orange, a little bit of yellow, and mix a color in your palette. But then when you put it down, it needs to be a flat color. Now when that's completed, and you'll have due dates on the assignment, we'll then move on to the 3D. And for the 3D, it's going to be the same exact thing. We're going to go through and think about colors, only we're going to be blending. So with blending, you can see the sky transitions. It gets lighter as it goes down. The trees actually have textures in them. The rocks have shading and texture. A great example again with this lion, you can see the difference between the 2D painting and the 3D painting. The 3D is done really, really well in terms of making the fur look like real fur. The eyes, the highlights, all very realistic. So this is going to be the challenge, but it all really goes back to when we first started doing our monochromatic paintings, when we had one color mixing. Now we've got many colors at our disposal to mix. And one thing that really helps out in seeing this is, even though we've got a very light blue to a white, it's blended. So we're using whites and blues. As we're looking at the different petals and the flowers, now we've got oranges and yellows. There's a lot of things that we can do with this to really make this look more three-dimensional. My recommendation is, when we get to that, which is going to be later, the 2D is going to be first, then the 3D. But when we get to the 3D, I'd recommend you get in touch with me. You email me. I'll be trying to message you guys out the best I can whenever we get to that part, so that I can say, hey, you're going to want to do this part first, this part second, this part third, and try to help you out with some of those techniques. It's going to be a lot more complex when we get to this stage, but you want to make sure you're in contact with me throughout the entire process.